Hello, everyone. Welcome to 7E's Inside ESG, where we meet with leaders in sustainability, climate, and the ESG space. This series aims to provide a clear view into the ever-changing landscape of sustainability practices. I'm Doron, Marketing Director for 7E, and an AI-driven compliance solution focusing on streamlining data collection and reporting for ESG, EHS, and risk management. Today, I'm excited to welcome Colleen Sherry. Hey, Colleen.
Hello.
Great to have you. Colleen is the VP Sustainability and Emissions Management for GLJ, a global energy consulting group. Colleen is an energy and sustainability leader with over 25 years of experience in environmental development, reporting, growth, and investments. Colleen has a strong scientific and academic background, and in addition to her position with GLJ, she is an academic associate at the Arizona State University. Colleen, thanks again for joining us today. Before we dive in, would you mind sharing with us a bit about yourself, and if you can, share with us where your sustainability journey started?
One of the things I noticed about some of the questions that you posed to me is they're all very big questions. So you're gonna have
it needs to be challenging.
You can cut me off at any point. But I guess I'll start with, I'm currently in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I was not born in Calgary, but I've been here a large part of my life. I was born in town Nanaimo on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and I think many people who are in the environmental space and in the sustainability space can probably look back on their lives and say it was a journey to get there, but you can see kind of pieces along the way that clearly identify why you end up where you do. One of those things I'd say is, growing up in a place like Nanaimo, close to the ocean, in a very natural and beautiful environment, definitely is something that's really special to me and something that I take with me always. The other thing I'll say, early life sorts of things, I was very, very privileged, very lucky with the family that I lived with my family. They are very community minded. So we spent a lot of time engaged in community, I'll say, participation and spending a lot of time with other people, for other people. That was something that was very important to my parents, to my grandparents. In terms of education, my father was an educator, and both of my parents and all of my family were very supportive of education. So that was one thing that was top of the list. Everything that you do, if it's focused on education, you'd get full support. In terms of we were a family that traveled together a lot, so we got to see a lot of places, see a lot of different experiences, see people in different communities and how people lived, and also the natural environment that was different place to place. And I think a lot of that as well is it's a really good basis for entrepreneurship and being able to try different things, because I have a very strong belief and understanding of a safety net from my family, from my community, from my husband and my family now. So when you have that, I guess, sense of self and that real belief in everybody around you is going to support you regardless of what you do and how you do it, you're willing to take risk and take these leaps of faith. And so I guess all of that, to me, it all goes towards the sustainability journey itself, because I started not as a sustainability professional. I started as an energy professional, and it was an evolution of my learnings, my knowledge, my experiences that sort of coalesced towards that. So things like community, recognizing again that I want to work in service of people, and being able to experience different communities when I was in the energy space, and recognizing, the being in headquarters in downtown Calgary is not the same as what's happening out in the communities where the developments are happening, wanting to participate to ensure that those voices were heard, that we were doing things in our best way possible. Also involved in Indigenous engagement, seeing how things were impacting them, and wanting again to ensure that they were either participating or at least at a minimum being able to have their concerns addressed and changes made as a result of things that were important to them. So it's all these things kind of is this nexus, I think, of your education, of your belief in community, of experiencing different parts of the world, seeing the importance of differences between people and place, but also that uniqueness needs to be respected and incorporated into things. And that last part about, taking risks, this idea for myself of, leaving the energy space, joining GLJ more specifically as a consultancy, and starting up the sustainability and emissions management team so that we could expand what our company was working on, but more importantly, to work with our clients and ensure that they could do and be strong energy players, but also recognizing that participating in sustainability, participating in ESG initiatives is in support of energy development, not in contrast to or in opposition to. So it's, I think of things very holistically as to why I am who I am, why I believe the things I believe, and why I want to bring that into my work and into the energy space where I've spent the majority of my career, to see them thrive, but also to ensure that the energy space evolves and changes as we learn more and can adopt new technologies that are in support of sustainability going forward.
When did you start the team at GLJ?
So I am about 4 years in at this point, and the team, it probably took plus or minus a year to get established what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. So I did have, there were already people at GLJ who were involved, but it was subsequent to that. So kind of 3 years now that we've been growing the team specifically around sustainability, emissions management, and the support of clients specifically in that space.
Wow. I love how you describe the journey. Different people I meet here have different journeys, and I think the fact that you checked all the boxes for me, I have to say. The part about community, the part about traveling, I think traveling and seeing other cultures, it has a big impact on that. So I can relate personally to that very much. Great. I would like to move forward and I'm starting kind of close to home, I think, for you. And if you can describe for us what the decarbonization efforts look like specifically now in 2025, and what we should expect to see from the energy sector specific. As you said, energy is where you come from.
Yeah. So again, huge question.
Yeah, so, you can take it however you see it, but I thought I'm bringing an expert, so I'll the big answer.
I think it's great. I think it's great because I think the way I approach everything is more the big picture, and right, looking at how things kind of work together.
Look, I think a lot of the people listening and some are looking for where to start, or someone maybe at the beginning of it and kind of needs to see the big picture maybe, and then that can give them the route or the path where to start.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I look at sustainability or ESG, and I sometimes use those phrases interchangeably, although I know that there's distinction between them, but it's more the sentiment, I guess. Mm-hmm. As it relates to the energy sector, the pursuit of decarbonization is a very large topic. It covers many different strategies. It covers many different technologies, and it's also happening at a different pace or different paces within different companies and in different types of energies and things.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, again, my belief looking at it from the top is that there is no silver bullet or singular methodology. And so it is good that it is being considered from many perspectives and in many different ways, because I think that is the pathway to achieving or heading towards decarbonization, is the recognition of that diversity of need, and that it will look and feel different to different companies and different people. But I think ultimately within the sustainability emissions management team at GLJ, what we have done very specifically, because sometimes when you have that big over or the umbrella of all of this, to talk about some specific things is probably going to be the easiest way to approach this. So one of the things that we do as a team and working with our clients is with regards to corporate sustainability strategies. So again, this idea that this will look and feel differently for different organizations. And I think as a sustainability professional, it's really important to meet people where they are, meet companies where they are, because that's how you develop a successful relationship, and that's how you get them engaged and wanting to continue down this path of sustainability. So it's taking into account getting to know the client, getting to know their company, understanding what is unique about them. So whether it's their assets, whether it's the skill sets of their people, whether it's their specific goals, what's their budget, what's their timeline, and all of that goes towards a strategy. And so the development of a sustainability strategy is so important to support a positive decarbonization journey for a company. And because you need that alignment between the organization and their strategy for there to be success. And it is only with success that decarbonization is going to occur. So I start with that is that strategy component.
Okay.
Another thing is the recognition that because GLJ is largely services oil and gas professionals or oil and gas companies, is the identifying very specific places where decarbonization is a big part of that corporate strategy. So one of the things that we're involved with is what's known as RSG, responsibly sourced gas. So it's a certification process. And it is a certification process that can either be specific to emissions, so methane mitigation or CO2 mitigation, or it can be more broadly certified so that you're looking at the entirety of ESG. So how are you as an organization engaging with stakeholders? What is happening on your sites from an environmental perspective, a biodiversity perspective, water, Indigenous engagement, things like that. And so it's a process that is done by an independent party to review who you are as an organization and how you go about your business. And if you receive certification, that certification does have global recognition, and then the customers of those oil and gas companies can recognize and determine that they are participating in. And this is another conversation that will come up, is it's the supply chain of energy. So sustainability and decarbonization happens at many points. It's not a singular thing that happens once. It's at all points down the supply chain. But in talking about technology and that, oftentimes it is only through certification at certain points along that pathway that the end user, the customer, just the person on the street will understand if they are participating and supporting decarbonization by making certain choices, or if they're not, because they don't get to see all these pieces. So I think certification is a big thing. Another area that GLJ spends a lot of time with is CCS, so carbon capture sequestration, and recognizing that some people are are not necessarily supportive of that technology in and of itself as a path towards decarbonization.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, in working with clients and within an industry as oil and gas is producing a product that, some people in the world may have a disagreement with that product at this point. We recognize, and the energy industry as a whole recognizes, that it will continue to be produced and utilized for decades. And with that in mind, it should still very specifically be decarbonized. And one of the paths towards that can be carbon capture and sequestration. That's not just for oil and gas. I mean, it's for cement, it's for steel, it can be used in any process that produces a certain, I'll say, stream of emissions. But with regards to oil and gas, it's obviously a key technology towards decarbonization. And specifically for Alberta and Western Canada, we are in a very lucky position geographically and geologically to have the subsurface, the pore space available that is very able to take maximum volumes of CO2 emissions and permanently sequester them. And that I recognize that is a fairly unique thing to Alberta. Not every country or region has the geology that enables that, but we definitely do. So in combination with the industries that we have, it is a very opportunistic technology, I'll say. And just a couple of more quick things. RNG, there's acronyms coming out, the yin yang. So RNG is renewable natural gas. Again, Western Canada being a very agriculturally based society. So methane specifically from agricultural processes, and biodigesters can produce a biofuel or biomethane. It's called many different things, but if we package that into RNG or renewable natural gas, again, that can be utilized, that can be sent directly down a pipeline and utilized in the same way as geologic natural gas, or however you want to refer to that. So that is another big piece that is being used towards decarbonization. And then, lastly, what I'll say is that GLJ is also involved in non-oil and gas items. Some of our clients that we've focused on predominantly in the last 10 years or so are in the geothermal space. So looking for opportunities to decarbonize baseload power. We are involved in things such as lithium extraction from oil field brines, which again is being utilized for battery storage, battery power, and also more recently getting involved in the data center space, whether it's natural gas fired electricity generation in conjunction with CCS, or whether it's aligning with renewable energy. So there is much happening in the decarbonization space, and some of it is right in the energy space or oil and gas, and some of it is truly adjacent or in addition to. So it's like I said, the idea that decarbonization is not a single technology used in a single way. It is a vast swath of opportunities that are being addressed by many.
Wow, that's great. And as I said before, it is a wide range. It's a wide topic to discuss, but I think that's great. And I wasn't aware of all the geological situation in Canada. That it's you're taking advantage of that. It's amazing. That's very interesting. I'll move forward. I would like to move to talk about something that's really been a lot of the news lately is it's really feeling that the past year specifically, I would say 2 years, but specifically the last year was kind of a giant leap in technology adoption, and specifically with AI. I don't think we can have a conversation without saying AI at least once. So I'll do that. How do you see these changes and innovation impacting environmental work and specifically sustainability reporting?
Well, I find it kind of interesting that, a few years ago or a decade or more ago, there was a proliferation of, sustainability and ESG frameworks and
Right.
methodologies. And now we have this proliferation of the AI technology. So we've had growth in multiple aspects of sustainability space and AI in support of that. So I think proliferation comes with both benefits and challenges. The benefits obviously is that any technologies that are going to be in support of what we are trying to achieve as a global population, as sustainability professionals, or as energy providers. Anything that can help us do that better, do it more efficiently is a benefit. The challenge, of course, comes from ensuring that as an organization or as a working professional that you can identify and capitalize on the technologies that are most specific and most useful to your workflows and to your needs. So you sometimes need to try things and work through kind of the trial and error sort of idea to identify what's going to be most beneficial to you. But I think ultimately, and specifically aligning AI to sustainability reporting, I think the idea of being able to more easily develop reports is important for organizations. The ability to ensure that your data is accurate, that you can point to where it's coming from, how it's being collected, how you compare it, both within your own organization, year to year or month to month, or in comparison and contrast to your peers, your competitors, to others. I think that it all goes towards improved performance, and because the more you can understand your data, the more you can work with your data, the more beneficial it's going to be for you to be able to make the changes that you need to actually see improvement through your operations.
Yeah, I mean, if you can save time also on, I mean, data collection is still a huge topic for us as in the ESG space, and I think, and I don't know if you're saying that already, if we can save time on the actual data collection, have more time for the more strategic work, and have time on the insights, analytics of side of things.
Well, that's exactly the case, because, and whether it's the data itself or if it's the reporting of the data, I mean, the ultimate goal is not to create a report. The ultimate goal is to have data that you understand, that
and
you can utilize
impact the
for change.
organization? Yeah, how can that
Exactly.
impact the organization? It's I think over years we've been very much focused on creating a report or meeting a specific regulation, which is very important. But at the end of the day, if you have the data, what does it do? And I think that comes back to your previous question. You said, what kind of organization are you? What kind of organization do you want to be? And can this help you get there?
Absolutely. And I think everything, recognizing things as tools, it should be seen as the opportunity that it is. And if you can maximize the benefits of a tool to the benefit of your organization, that again is this idea that then is in support of decarbonization more broadly and sustainability more broadly, because you do your part. Your role is improving, and so too can the roles of other groups down the energy supply chain.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that we haven't touched, by the way, the other side of AI, and that's the energy impact of energy consumption to do with AI. Is that something you think about, or is that something that's concerning, um, or do you see it from any angle?
I think the ultimate efficiencies are everywhere, and
Yeah.
so if there's efficiencies in the use of AI, and so if what you're doing year over year as an organization is trying to identify where can I make change, what percentage change is that, and how is that getting me year after year closer
Yeah.
to my ultimate goal. So every efficiency opportunity that exists should be taken. And of course, AI will both help the efficiency of a process by saving time, saving human capital, so doing quite a bit like that.
Yeah.
But it is also in and of itself an efficiency item, because it is self-learning. It's moving faster, using less energy. So it's an iterative within itself, as well as what it feeds to the organization. So it's that it just continues to grow and build from an efficiency perspective. So yeah, since I am not a technology person per se, that's the part that I go, you over there, who that is your specialty,
That's fair.
you
That's
give
fair.
that to me and I will use
Yep.
that, but I
Yep.
won't fully understand how it's being done or to the extent that it is. But certainly, even just some of the news recently, we've been talking about in Canada, I'm sure globally, about the
Mhm.
expected growth in data centers. And then there was the expected
Yes.
energy requirements to
Yeah.
allow for the growth in data centers. And even within a very short period of time, there was also the recognition that those data centers would in and of themselves start to lessen the need for additional energy, because they would
Mhm.
self-learn a more efficient methodology to
Yeah.
utilize said energy. So is that energy growth, how steep and large is that energy need going to be? Or is it going to start and then somehow flatten or even decrease because of the efficiency models being developed within the AI systems themselves? So I think that'll be a really exciting
Yeah.
near
We'll have to see.
term
We'll
perspective.
have to
Yeah,
see
for sure.
soon. Cool. What I'd like to ask now is, again, a lot of the ESG work is to do with policy, I would say, and policy. We see changes in policy in different regions in the world, to say the least. But more specifically, and kind of touching recent news, is considering changes in policy, specifically in the US, and regulations changing in EU for CSRD, for example. I know CSRD alone we can talk about for hours, but just as an example for the EU, but talking about going again close to home, if we're looking at changes in the US, in the EU, what effect do you see that that might have on the Canadian market, or what do you hear at the moment?
Yeah, and if we did talk about this for hours, I think you'd lose all your audience. I'm just going to say. Regulation is important, but not always the most exciting topic. Uh,
No,
so
but
we
it affects a lot of our lives at the end of it, and in this, and I think a lot of our listeners are from our space. So regulation changes. There's any update to CSRD, we all get back to work. We work long hours or we work less hours, depending what they're releasing this week.
exactly. Within our team, we spend a lot of time on regulation, and it's the starting point of basically every client interaction, because even highly informed clients still come to us and go, so what do we need to do? Or what's
What we
coming at
have to
us, or
do,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah,
What's coming at us? That's a good one. What's coming at us? That's the scientific phrase for that, I think. And this in
exactly.
2025. Yeah, for sure.
So getting back to your question, so I think the starting point is, and this is probably true of every country in the world. Within your own country, you have your own regulations, you have your own market, so you need to be informed about that reality so that you can succeed as an organization within that specific jurisdiction. So so with that in mind, what I'll first do is just kind of review some of the stuff that's happened quite recently in Canada, and it aligns with what's happening in the rest of the world. But this is news from Canada. The CSSB, so the Canadian Sustainability and Standards Board, which aligns with the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. So in 2024, CSSB developed and then finalized the Canadian standards, which are referred to as CSDS 1 and CSDS 2. So CSDS 1 is the requirements for disclosure of sustainability related financial information. And then the CSDS 2 is the climate related disclosure. So again, it aligns with what happened at ISSB and such. So the idea there was the specific Canadian context. There were specific things that Canada wanted to address. One of the major ones is our Indigenous commitments. So that needs to be very central to anything with regards to ESG and sustainability work within Canada. So that needed to be incorporated. Then there was also areas around just the timing and the sizing of organizations involved, how it was going to roll out and what that was going to look like. On top of that, the Canadian process, once the CSDS 1 and 2 were determined, is then that creates that voluntary outline or framework, and then the process to turn that voluntary framework into a regulatory requirement is can be a fairly long process. But in Canada, it starts with the Canadian Securities Administrators, so the CSA, which administers our stock exchange and publicly listed companies. So that's the starting point. And then from that, it would roll out to similar bodies that sit within the provinces themselves before then it comes back to the CSA and then goes down the regulatory pathway within government. But with everything that's going on in the world today, just in April, so just last month, the CSA chose to pause that project work. So we have the frameworks, and those have been approved. So organizations can get the frameworks, they can understand and read and follow the frameworks, but the CSA itself is not going to require their utilization as of yet within the publicly listed companies, and therefore it's not going to go to the provinces. So there's a little bit of a hiccup there in transferring the voluntary framework into the regulatory space. However, the information and the knowledge and the awareness is available for organizations to utilize. Yeah. The other big thing that happened in early 2025 were 5 Canadian major banks pulled out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the UN initiative. So again, they were involved in that since 2021, and they have subsequently pulled out of that. So our stock market, our banks are pulling out of that. But I think a lot of people look at that and say that that could be seen as a repudiation of ESG topics within Canada. But all the announcements have been very strongly that is not the case. The idea here are that companies and banks and such are, until there's regulation set, they are more following their own corporate strategies, many of which, again, align with these frameworks. But because there is still a lot of flux globally,
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of concern about fixing to very specific frameworks. And by staying out of it, or being aligned but not committed, in a sense,
I
that you
understand.
can still follow and benefit from all the work that has been done
Yeah.
without formalizing it in quite the same way. So that's kind of what's happening in Canada. And like I say, there's still commitment, there's still progress, there's still movement. It's just not necessarily people saying, I am aligned to or following this or doing that. The other part of, so you'd asked with regards to what's happening in the world and the impact on Canada. And obviously, Canada is very much a part of the global markets. We are a country that is highly dependent on our natural resources, and even our manufacturing and our agriculture to be sent to the world. The Canadian population is quite small, so we want to be involved in very much in global trade and exporting everything that we have in Canada to the world. So as a result of that, obviously, when you are a strong exporting nation, it is as important to understand the global jurisdictional requirements as it is to understand our own, because everything that we send needs to land somewhere, and where it lands, it needs to fulfill the requirements of that country. So absolutely, we're strongly watching the markets, and as I said, things like the CSSB was following very much of the language and the methodologies that were being put into the international space, and that will continue to be the case even after this pause. This is just a kind of a watch and wait and observe what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And our reality here in Canada is that we have a very close neighbor. We share very large borders
I wonder who
with
that is.
the United States. So, what they do has an enormous impact on Canada, and we need to be both aware of that and acknowledge that, although we are still a sovereign and independent nation, and are very willing to choose our own path, but not uninformed as to what's happening next door. So I think that's probably not unlike most countries in the world, that you're internal and external. And then,
by the way, I see that. Sorry, I'm just to resonate that we see with different customers and partners we have, even for US customers, ESG is not a standalone game. I mean, you cannot, even for a country like the US, which is obviously bigger in terms of population, not in land, but in population, does a lot of the companies work internationally. And since, as you said, even places where the regulation is changing, we see changes to CSRD in Europe, and we see in other places. But since this progress happening, I see in the UK, in Asia, and of course in Europe. And so we see companies doing the process and moving forward in the US. And I think Canadian companies are not just affected by US, but also affecting US manufacturers and US brands, and the same happens, and vice versa with Europe and other places. So I think there is place for optimism here, whether it's with one regulation or another, right?
Absolutely, and I am a highly optimistic person, so I'm good with that, and I honestly actually believe that. I don't just want that to be true. It is true, and but none of this is a straight line, right? We are going to ebb and flow, and some of that is put upon us, and some of it is our own choosing. But I think ultimately it's what the people want. we can also talk about the ideas around, sustainability and how that influences, in, I guess, peer comparisons or product comparisons or things, because I think there's going to be a lot happening in the space as as organizations potentially move away from specific frameworks. Again, the public and the consumers are, if that is of importance to them, they're going to vote with their wallets and their choices and their expectations and demands. And so there's
yeah, we said before, as we said, I think 2-3 questions before. It's about what does it do for the organization, not just meeting a specific framework or meeting a regulation, but if we can walk the walk and have the data that we can change the organization. The demand is coming from a younger generation, from consumers, and as I said before, it's we see U.S. customers with European or German vendors, and we see or customers in Canada, and it's NOAA almost is acting in one place, and I think that is the most important part, is the progress and what do we do with the data we find. The regulation will come. That's as you said, we don't want to bore the people here with the regulations, but it's more about the value we bring with that. It's and even the opportunity.
I was going to say one last point, and we see this in the energy space as well as in this. When technologies are changing really quickly, regulation is going to lag behind that technological change, because they can only regulate what they know and how they know it's being used and what it's being used for. And so when technology is going quick, the regulator almost stands back. We spend actually a fair bit of time talking to the regulator. We don't lobby, we're not a lobbyist, but we inform them of how clients are, how they're working, what their needs are, what's working for them and what's not, so that the regulator can understand, is a regulation we put in place a few years ago actually helping us move towards where we want to go, or is it actually hindering progress because it's now outdated and is in place or in opposition to progress instead of in support of progress. So technology pace of change is a hardship for regulators. So I will give them that. They're not all bad.
That's a good end to talk about the regulation part. You won't believe it, but we are getting close to the end of this interview. I think we can go for another 2 hours easy, but we'll try and keep it. Before we wrap up, I have a kind of a bonus question I ask everyone who joins Inside ESG, and kind of really short, and although I think we covered a lot of it before and the beginning, but still kind of, if you can pinpoint what motivations and drivers do you see evolving in the near future for sustainability, kind of from a personal point of view?
So, and I think we have touched on a fair bit of things, but I'll say 3 things kind of quickly come to mind for me. One, we've already talked about the fact that young people are expecting things to change. And so within GLJ, we've just gone through a hiring cycle for new grads and interns and stuff. And almost every person, and I was not part of the interviewing process. It's largely engineers. Our company is largely engineering driven. And almost every person that they were interviewing said that one of the reasons they were talking to GLJ was because of the sustainability and emissions management team, the work that we're doing on geothermal, and the fact that we have an ESG report. And so that is what young people are looking for. And they're going to be the decision makers of the future. So if that's what's of interest, then that's where the companies are going to go. Second idea is around global trade, which again we've already talked about, and these, and I'll say particularly these cross-border type mechanisms. So even if within your own country you are not wanting or not yet progressing towards certain expectations, regulations, requirements, however, if you, like Canada, are exporting your products, if you wanted to enter another market, you have to be respectful of that. And I'll say, for Canada looking away from the US towards other places, aligning with the US, if the US is not heading down this path or progressing at the same pace, they're actually, in my mind, potentially going to fall behind. And everybody who's now looking to other global trading partners are going to be leapfrogging ahead of that. So it actually puts them at risk on a global stage if and when they choose to re-enter a more normal trading alliance. And then the last thing I'll say is it's the supply chain idea. It's the fact that we need to be talking about the entire life cycle of things. So life cycle analysis and showcasing not that just one piece of a product is better than another piece of a product. So in the oil and gas space, it's if solar is the better energy provider, then let's talk about the entirety of the life cycle of solar, so that again we can improve it, not just at its efficiency of transforming sunlight into electricity, but how a farm is developed, how a solar panel is developed, how things are recycled. So it's the entirety of the life cycle of products, because we don't want to have an unintended consequence, because I think oil and gas, the emissions is largely an unintended consequence of developing hydrocarbons as a business, as an opportunity for improving the lives of people. But recognizing now that unintended consequences do happen, let's not head down that path with other energy systems and then 100 years later go, wow, we really shouldn't have been doing that because this is the cause. So that's kind of my soapbox.
Amazing. Colleen, I really feel we can go for a few more hours, but I think it's we'll have to leave for another session for sure. So I'll say that now that thank you so much for joining me today and having this talk with us. Really been amazing and interesting, both specifically on the Canadian side and from your experience and sharing your journey. Really like that. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
No, I just thank you so much for your time. I think conversations is going to be what gets us where we need to go, and sharing that with other people to get them excited about sustainability and emissions management and ESG, is I think it's a really important time in the world and lots of really good things happening.
Completely agree. And I share the optimism. As I said before, I think we need more optimism for people working in our space. And there is, as we talk about innovation and a few other things. Great. So again, thank you so much for joining today. And I would like to tell the audience, if you have any further questions for Colleen, feel free to contact her on LinkedIn or go to the GFJ website. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you have any other questions for me or for 7E, feel free to send us an email to hello@the7e.com or reach out on LinkedIn. For more Inside ESG, subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels, and see you next time. Colleen, thank you so much.
Thanks.